Michael from CTW here, and continuing into getting more out of your dyno. So we've talked about being consistent, we've talked about how to mount the shock, we've talked about warming up, doing the rod force. Well, now we need to talk about speeds, because you have to run speeds, and that's where the rest of the data comes from. What speeds to run. I can tell you, back in the early 90s when we started this, I started working for Kurt, we had very limited choices. We had 1-speed dynos. They ran at 10 inches per second, and that's the graph you got. And we were all delighted with that. That was wonderful. Eventually we got to the point where we could control the inverters and run variable speed, and we could run any speed we wanted. And that opened up a whole new window into the damper, running different speeds. So we have to decide, when you're building your test, do we run 1 speed? Do we run 5 speeds? Do we run 100? What is it that we're trying to do? What is it we're trying to see? And how would we do that? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to go through that. You can see on the screen here, I have a very simple force versus velocity plot. It's absolute velocity, so it's basically, as you all will call it, the folded over graph. Compressions on the top, rebounds on the bottom, and you have 4 different speeds. You have a 1 inch, a 3, a 5, and a 10. And in so much automobile racing on paved and even dirt, you're probably still going to want to run more than 1 speed. And here's the reasoning behind that. You run at 10 inches per second. That is your damper accelerating from 0 to 10 in back. Everything involved in that is the acceleration to 10 in back. But so much of what's going on in the car is not accelerating to 10 in back. It's slower. Maybe a big bump, maybe it's faster. So just using that 1 speed gives you the data for that speed, but it doesn't really tell you what the damper was doing if it was only accelerating from 0 to 1 inch per second. So if you look at a 10 inch per second graph and try to compare it to a 1 inch, the information's different, and we'll just turn these off. So the green one is when the dyno, let me just turn off the PVP to get rid of one more line. When the dyno is accelerating from 0 to 10 in back, massively different when accelerating 0 to 1 inch per second, right? Bleed works different, everything in the damper works different, and it's based on acceleration. We all see the crank dyno, we all put it on a certain stroke and we run it, and we should understand that when we run to 10 inches or 250 millimeters, it starts at the bottom, 0 velocity, accelerates to peak velocity and compression, and then has to go back, slow down to 0 while still compressing the shock. So you have accelerating to 10, deaccelerating back to 0. In rebound extension, it's doing the same way. So if you run at 10 inches per second, it's accelerating to 10, and that's the way the damper looks like. If you're running at 1, you don't have to accelerate as hard. The damper is not accelerating as hard to get to 1 inch per second. So you get different information, you get different curves, because different things come into play at slow speed and high speed. It's easy, certainly, if you have data acquisition and you run on the track and you know the velocities in the corner, the velocities the car, the shocks are running, and you could use that to figure out some speeds to run. Most people don't have that. So the question is, what do I do in lieu of that? And a very good place to start, just in general, is to run a 1 inch, a 3, a 5, and a 10. That gives you at least some slow speed, medium speed, and high speed for a given race car. Now, this doesn't really apply to motorcycles and 4x4s. They're going to go a lot faster, but a lot of the feel is still going to be low speed. And by low speed, the question is always, what is low speed? It's really true. If you think about the damper, you try to break it up. You have slow speed movements. Seal drag is a very slow speed movement. It tries to move so slow that it's just friction. The seals drag. Then you have the bleed of the damper. If you have a lot of bleed, the fluid's going to flow easily through the bleed at those lower speeds. Then as it gets faster, the bleeds are going to fill. The fluid has to find a different place to go. That's where it starts to hit the shim stack. Once it hits the shim stack, every speed after that is really going to be on a given slope, unless something happens like a second stage, some kind of progressive valving, cavitation, something where something else happens. But once it hits the shim stack, it should be the same slope, until something else happens. So slow speeds in the bleed, the slow speeds, 0 to 1, 0 to 2 inches per second, typically. Kind of depends on if you have that no bleed damper on or you have a high bleed damper on. Then it starts to transition somewhere after 2 into 3, where it starts to get into the shim stack. And you can see this damper's gone up. Somewhere in here it's hit the shim stack, bleeds are all full, the fluid's flowing so fast that it can't go through the bleeds anymore, so it goes into the shim stack, the piston, and it heads out in that direction. And if I turn on the 5, you can see that, it's hit the shim stack somewhere in here, and that's just going to keep going on into faster speeds. Again, unless it hits a second stage or it hits a problem where the damper just can't go that fast due to some restriction somewhere. But this area in here is what a lot on a race car, certainly on paved track, all the things the driver's feeling, like roll, pitch, yaw, on the gas, off the gas. That's where this area, it comes so effective in tuning. If you look at that, when the driver's trying to get on, he's in the corner, he's waiting. When can I pick up the throttle? He's trying to feel that. Those are low speed events. Roll, those are low speed events for the most part. Those are happening slower. He hits a curb, he hits a rut, he hits a berm. Those are high speeds. So if you only have that 10 inch per second data, you can affect the high speed stuff. But to affect that low speed stuff, that feel, if I'm trying to go to the gas and the car's not set, I just don't feel comfortable, those are low speed events. Or the car's rolling over too fast or too slow, those are low speed events. And if you've ever had this situation where you have 2 dampers, at 10 inches per second they look identical, but the driver swears one is better than the other. Well, chances are if you run slower, you're going to see what he's talking about. You run slower, they're going to be different. That's one of those big keys and something we've learned along the way, and important way to think about when you're setting up your speeds. After that, once it hits the shim stack, I've seen a lot of things, but from customers. So you talk about people will run out to a meter per second, or they'll run as fast as their dyno will go, and they'll set up so many speeds. They'll go every 2-5 inches, and you start to see that slope is the same. It hasn't changed. So you can start to remove some of those speeds as well. But the ones in the slow speed, those are your bleeds, and those are your chassis feel and your weight transfers in those areas. And those high speed events, those are a little different. You can handle them differently. If you look at, say, that point, and you want to tune that point, or you want to keep that point, you could see that you could do a linear shock to get up there. You can do a digressive, as this is a digressive piston. There's various ways to get there. While your 10 inches will always, the number's always going to be the same. How it got there is different, and that's so much about choosing different speeds so that you can then relate them to what you're trying to tune. You go to the track and he's really bothered by a bump off the turn. Well, you might be looking at high speed. If he's really just not ready to go to the gas, he's just waiting for something to feel right, something to settle, a little weight transfer to happen faster or slower, that's in those low speed areas. So if you run more speeds, you can then look at the data at the speed you need to in order to make the change later. And that is the real key here. So, wanted to go over that. So, trying to figure out what speeds to run, there you have it. There's a little bit of insight for you. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or comments, contact us using the information in the video description.